They say modern civilization is built on concrete, steel, and silicon. But the real unsung hero of the Anthropocene is plastic. That slick, shape-shifting miracle that hugs your salad, cushions your Amazon addiction, lines your arteries with microbads, and refuses, politely but firmly, to ever decompose. Now imagine this. One random Tuesday morning, every piece of plastic on Earth suddenly vanishes. Not recycles, not melts, vanishes. Poof. Gone. Your toothbrush? Vanish. Your car dashboard? Gone. The keyboard you're using to Google, is plastic really that bad? Good luck typing that now. Welcome to What If Horizons, the podcast where reality is just a polite suggestion and speculation is the national pastime. I'm your host, and today we're diving face first into the chaos, calamity, and curious upside of a world that just ghosted plastic. Now, before you begin fantasizing about dolphins throwing house parties in the newly cleaned oceans, let's be clear, this is not the green utopia you ordered. Plastic is not just in your bubble wrap and Coke bottles. It's in your electronics, your clothing, your furniture, your food packaging, your eyeglasses, your pacemakers, and yes, your condoms. It's the invisible scaffolding of modernity, and removing it is less like decluttering and more like yanking out the rebar from a skyscraper while you're still inside. In our grand hypothetical, the vanishing occurs instantaneously. No warning, no prep, no time to switch to hemp-based smartphones. From the deepest point of the Mariana Trench to Jeff Bezos' private space station minibar, plastic is wiped clean from existence. Cue global panic. Hospitals become a horror show of unsealed syringes, malfunctioning ventilators, and surgeons now wondering why their gloves feel suspiciously like skin-on-skin contact. Food systems collapse within hours. You didn't realize how much plastic was keeping your yogurt from touching air, or your spinach from marrying E. coli. Supermarkets resemble war zones. Shelves are bare. Fridges go dark. Plastic insulation is gone. And your vegan friend finally realizes tofu isn't shelf-stable when it's oozing across the floor. Cars stall out en masse as dashboards. Fuel system components and even seatbelts cease to exist. Planes grounded. Trains disabled. Buses inoperable. Within a day, the global economy looks like it just got punched by an angry god who hates polymers. But it gets worse. Telecommunications buckle. Fiber optic cables, routers, satellites, anything made from or housed in plastic is either dead or dying. Your smartphone? Now a very pretty brick. Social media and influencers vanish into the void, unable to tell anyone about their raw panic, or worse, their product sponsorships. Humanity is now disconnected, ungloved, unsheltered, and unhinged. Environmentalists might spend a few glorious moments dancing in biodegradable glee, imagining a cleaner world. But then they remember their solar panels are toast, their wind turbine blades have snapped, and their reusable water bottles were unfortunately also plastic. The green revolution just had a cardiac arrest. Meanwhile, scientists are having simultaneous strokes, trying to explain the metaphysical nature of the vanishing. Did God finally answer Greta Thunberg's DMs? Is this aliens cleaning up our mess before colonizing Earth? Or is it the ultimate cosmic practical joke? You wanted a plastic-free world? Done. Enjoy starving in organic linen. The geopolitical fallout is immediate. Nations blame each other. Wars erupt over remaining non-plastic materials. Black markets explode with wood, metal, and glass. Billionaires retreat into carbon-neutral bunkers, now inconveniently without sealed plastic airlocks. Elon Musk tries to launch a Mars mission, but his Tesla spaceship falls apart mid-liftoff, the plastic seals, connectors, and internal systems having poofed out of existence. And the oceans? Ah, yes, the oceans. They look clearer, cleaner, more pristine than they've been since the 19th century. Sea turtles cautiously poke their heads above the waves, only to be met by humans weeping uncontrollably into non-waterproof cloth masks. Fish momentarily rejoice, then go extinct when aquaculture collapses without containment systems. What we're looking at is not a reset, it's a rebirth, violent, chaotic, and weirdly damp, because plastic, for all its sins, is not merely trash. It's our infrastructure, our armor, our modern mythology. Its sudden absence isn't cleansing, it's catastrophic. And that, my friends, is just day one. Without warning, everything made of plastic has vanished. Phones, gone. Shoes disintegrated. Toothbrushes vanished. Water bottles, caps, fridges, credit cards, helmets, synthetic clothes, computer mice, car interiors, packaging, medical syringes, even the synthetic fiber used in your underwear. Poof. It didn't dissolve. It didn't melt. It didn't leave a warning label. It simply ceased to exist. Our first instinct, naturally, is to panic. Supermarkets are a horror show. Food that once sat nicely shrink. Wrapped on shelves is now rotting, thawing, or leaking onto linoleum. Milk cartons have gaped open. Prepackaged salad bags have become sad lettuce puddles. Shoppers stare, shell-shocked, at naked cereal, piles of loose biscuits, and melted cheese globs previously encased in neat plastic armor. The candy aisle looks like someone dropped a bomb of glucose. Out on the streets, chaos takes a slightly more metallic turn. Cars halt mid-highway as their dashboards short-circuit from missing plastic components. Traffic lights stop working. Electric scooters are now heaps of metal sticks, lacking their plastic shells. Your earbuds? Now just exposed wiring. Glasses, not the fancy "you're so smart" kind, but the "I can't see anything" kind, are warped or half gone. Because guess what? Plastic lenses. Even something as basic as zippers on your jeans might vanish if they're made of polymer blends. Naked people roam department stores not for fashion, but because elastic waistbands went extinct. But hold on, this isn't just a material problem. It's a health crisis. Hospitals are in pandemonium. For drips dangle limply, their tubing missing. No syringes, no ventilator masks, no gloves, no dialysis filters. Catheters are now copper pipes or just nothing. Modern medicine has been stripped of its sterile shell. Surgeons hold their metal tools and stare at the empty slots where plastic parts should be. Forget high-tech surgery, we've just been shoved back to 1890. In poorer nations, where plastic was used as a cheap substitute for more expensive materials, people suffer even more. Water containers, gone. Tarps and waterproof roofs for disaster relief, disintegrated. Cell phones that powered micro-businesses, dust. Suddenly, not only is there no plastic, there's no infrastructure, no logistics, no communication. It's not just about what's missing, it's what it exposes. Our over-reliance on plastic was always sold as convenience, light, cheap, strong, moldable. But behind that convenience was an economy utterly entangled in a substance derived from fossil fuels and spun into every thread of our modern lives. Imagine trying to send aid without plastic containers, transport medicine without packaging, or store vaccines without insulated coolers. It's not just that our world becomes less convenient, it becomes less survivable. Now some people cheer. Nature is free again, they say, dancing barefoot through forests in burlap onesies. Wildlife certainly benefits. Turtles no longer choke on six-pack rings. Seabirds stop vomiting plastic bits into their young. Coral reefs get a moment to breathe. But nature's jubilee is short-lived because we humans, in our desperation, start scrambling to replace what we've lost. And what do we reach for? Metal, glass, wood, cotton, anything but plastic. The unintended consequence? Resource depletion at warp speed. The demand for glass bottles skyrockets, so we burn sand into oblivion. Wood? Say goodbye to more trees. Metal mining? Welcome back, lead poisoning and child labor. With plastic gone, humanity doubles down on what's left, often with even greater environmental damage. You think paper straws were a polarizing debate? Wait until every drink on Earth has to come with a mini bamboo tree sticking out of it. So this isn't a utopia where Earth is healed and we go back to knitting hemp everything. This is an awkward, resource-scrambling transition where societies either collapse under the pressure or revolutionize material science overnight. But here's the real kicker. Even the data centers run your favorite AI podcast, yes, this one, begin to falter. Why? Because circuit boards, insulation, fans, they all relied on plastic. In the span of a single day, the world jumps from high-tech to high-tech support. Nothing's working. And as silence replaces the hum of servers, one terrifying thought echoes across the globe. We didn't just lose plastic. We lost time, preparation, and any backup plan worth the name. Let us now dive headfirst into the grocery store apocalypse. Picture this. You walk into your usual supermarket, the smell of disinfectant and desperation still clinging to the sliding doors. But something is off. There are no shopping carts. They had plastic wheels and plastic handles and those adorable plastic baby seats where kids pretended to drive through the aisles. They're gone. So are the baskets. You try to grab a loaf of bread, but find it naked, exposed to the cold, sterile air like a shy sunbather at a noose beach. No plastic wrap, no bag, no safety seal. The bread feels weird in your hands, warm and vulnerable. You put it down quickly. The cereal aisle is a graveyard. Without the plastic linings inside those cardboard boxes, flakes have gone stale, raisins have turned to dust, and the marshmallows have fused into a horrifying sugary brick that could legally qualify as building material.
Milk carton?
Cardboard now leaks. Yogurt? A distant dream. Cheese? Good luck with that one. Even the humble banana, normally content in its biodegradable peel, now lacks the tiny plastic sticker that told you it came from Guatemala, not Ecuador, and that it was fair trade and organic and possibly still legal to eat. Without plastic, we are suddenly made aware of just how leaky, sticky, smelly, and generally perishable the world really is. You know, the freezer section. It's like the Ice Age happened all over again, but worse. Plastic was what let us vacuum seal life into frozen eternity. Without it, meet defrosts in the puddles of regret. Ice cream melts and spills into a sticky tragedy. TV dinners become abstract art, corn, brownie, and mashed potatoes in a modernist swirl of post-industrial angst. And what about the cash register? Your loyalty card was plastic. Your receipt had a plastic coating. Your bag. Paper, maybe, if you're lucky, but even that disintegrates if you carry something heavier than a marshmallow brick. The cashier hands you a potato and says, "This is your change now." The disappearance of plastic doesn't just inconvenience, it reveals. It unmasks a modern economy designed around durability, flexibility, and disposability, now stripped to its biodegradable underpants. Think about food safety. Plastic once wrapped meat so tightly that even bacteria felt claustrophobic. Now without it, we're on a microbial roller coaster. Outbreaks of Salmonella, E. coli, Listeria, once controlled by the sanctity of plastic seals, now bloom freely in our organic cornucopia. Supermarkets resemble petri dishes. Consumer trust crumbles. One brave shopper writes a review that simply says, "I bit into a peach and it bit back." But it's not just food. The entire supply chain, the whole flow of goods, hiccups like a toddler on soda. Plastic was what let us pack, stack, and ship across oceans. Now, cardboard absorbs humidity. Glass breaks. Aluminum dents. Shipping companies try wooden crates again like it's 1895. Ships begin to look like pirate vessels. Or me shipment of laptops be seawater logged. The irony is delicious. We were all told plastic was evil. They clogged oceans, choked turtles, created floating islands the size of Texas. And now that it's gone, the same people who once tweeted #ban plastic are hoarding leftover Ziploc bags like they're the new currency. Craigslist fills with listings will trade iPhone for 3 rolls of cling film. Black markets rise. Somewhere in a basement in Belgium, a man opens a briefcase lined with plastic sporks. A hush falls over the room. "How much for all of them?" whispers a desperate restaurateur. "Your soul," replies dealer. This isn't dystopia, it's plastic withdrawal. Society is detoxing, cold turkey, and we're deep into the hallucinatory phase. And let's talk medication. Pill bottles? Plastic. Syringes? Plastic. Medical tubing? Plastic. Suddenly doctors are forced to use glass bottles, cotton wads, and hope. Hospitals resemble war zones from the 1800s. Nurses boil metal instruments and ask you to bite down on a stick. Infections spike. Surgeries are delayed. One unlucky patient needing a hip replacement finds his only option is to wait for a titanium implant wrapped in beeswax. Surgeons sigh and say, "We'll try again in a month if the bees cooperate." But it's not all horror. Some see opportunity. Silicon Valley, yes, that's silicone with an E, booms with startups pushing alternative materials. Mushroom foam packaging, seaweed bags, edible containers made from cassava. This plate is made of quinoa, boasts one entrepreneur before biting into it mid-pitch. Meanwhile, every food delivery service on Earth is in existential crisis. No plastic containers means no pad thai on a Tuesday night. Your local Thai place now delivers food in ceramic bowls they expect you to return, but you don't. Soon, the entire industry collapses under a mountain of missing crockery. So what's the verdict here? Plastic is like that messy roommate you always complained about but secretly depended on. Sure, it left wrappers on the floor and never recycled anything correctly. But when it's gone, you realize it was the one doing the grocery shopping, paying half the rent, and keeping the rats at bay. Without it, modern life isn't just harder, it's unrecognizable. Up next, we tackle how the beauty industry, the tech world, and even romance itself collapses under the weight of plasticlessness. Spoiler alert, dating apps without smartphones is just standing outside a cafe and hoping someone glances in your direction. The moment plastic vanished, the world's transportation infrastructure would begin to falter. Not with a cinematic explosion, but with a quiet and inconvenient unraveling. Consider the modern car, a miracle of engineering and an unwitting temple to petrochemical derivatives. The average car contains around 150 kilograms of plastic, used for dashboards, bumpers, fuel systems, insulation, wiring harnesses, and even the foam in your precious heated seats. Without plastic, cars would become metal skeletons, missing buttons, cables, protective housing, and safety components. Some would still technically run, but they'd be death traps with exposed electronics, unshielded wiring, and no airbags. And it's not just cars. Planes, with their lightweight plastic interiors and critical plastic components and avionics, would be grounded. Buses would stop running. Subway cars would short-circuit, lacking the insulation once taken for granted. Suddenly, mass transit would resemble a post-apocalyptic museum exhibit, a reminder of an age when humanity relied on invisible polymers to glue civilization together. This transportation breakdown wouldn't just inconvenience urban commuters, it would paralyze global supply chains. With trucks halted and planes grounded, perishables would spoil in warehouses, medicines would expire on loading docks, and life-saving equipment would remain stranded in shipping containers. Even maritime trade wouldn't escape. Modern ships are swimming with plastic components in their communication systems, engine casings, and safety equipment. Ironically, even the plastic buoys marking shipping lanes would disappear, leaving container vessels to drift like blind whales. The chaos wouldn't end there. The energy sector, proudly touting itself as the backbone of modernity, would face a plastic reckoning of its own. Oil rigs, pipelines, and refineries are lined, wrapped, or encased in plastics. Critical valves use high-performance polymers. Wiring insulation? Plastic. The gloves worn by technicians? Plastic. Even the solar and wind sectors, ever the sanctuaries of sustainable idealism, are built on plastic. Coatings on solar panels, the casings for turbines, the insulation around cables that feed into the grid. All of it would vanish. The renewable revolution would face an existential dilemma. How do you save the world without plastic when the tools you need to save it are made of plastic? Meanwhile, emergency services would struggle to function. Ambulances stripped of their plastic medical equipment would be rolling coffins. Fire trucks without insulated hoses, walkie-talkies, or helmets made with high-durability polymers would become glorified water tanks. Hospitals would descend into chaos, as outlined earlier, but now the absence of transport to get patients to the hospitals in the first place would compound the tragedy. This brings us to the cultural revelation hiding beneath all the headlines and crises, the fragility of systems we assume to be resilient. We've spent decades telling ourselves that human innovation is adaptable, that when faced with adversity, we rise to the occasion. But remove a single foundational material, one invisible to most daily thinking, and the gears of civilization grind to a halt. The irony, of course, is bitter. For years, environmentalists have pleaded for a world with less plastic. They've asked for bans, restrictions, behavioral changes. And rightly so. Plastic pollution is a planetary scourge. But this thought experiment reveals a truth that neither side of the plastic debate often admits. We are addicted to plastic not out of laziness or ignorance, but because we built an entire world with it in mind. Removing it in one instant would be like deleting oxygen from the atmosphere or gravity from physics. There is no graceful fallback. We are, for better or worse, a plastic species. Imagine a world without plastic, and now imagine what happens when you flush the toilet. Because guess what? Your toilet seat is gone. The pipe is gone. The tank, the lid, the internal valves, the flapper. Gone. You are now seated on a cold metallic ring bolted to ceramic, and praying that gravity alone is enough to take it all away. Welcome to Hour 4 of our No Plastic Dystopia, where the bathroom turns into an archaeological dig site from the 1800s. Let's zoom out from your uncomfortable position and look at the broader infrastructure. Most municipal water systems rely on vast networks of plastic pipes, particularly in newer developments. Polyvinyl chloride. Yes, that glamorous cousin of your garden hose is the standard in residential plumbing. With it gone, pipes burst, joints leak, water pressure drops, and neighborhoods quickly discover that relying on rust-prone copper or brittle clay is a great way to revive typhoid. Sewage? Let's just say it's not confined underground anymore. Your sidewalk now comes with optional puddles of history. Now back inside the house, if you thought kitchen life would fare better, think again. Blender parts, microwave panels, refrigerator shelving, food packaging. Pooh, the modern kitchen has just time-traveled to 1925. You'll find yourself storing leftovers in tinfoil, reheating food in iron skillets, and pouring milk into glass bottles so heavy your wrist files a workers' compensation claim. And speaking of milk, let's talk about the supermarket, or rather, the ghost of one. Virtually everything in it, from the yogurt cup to the shrink-wrapped chicken thighs, depends on some form of plastic. In our new reality, the dairy section becomes a leaky row of glass jars with beeswax seals. The meat section? Closed indefinitely. No vacuum sealing means spoilage in hours. Frozen foods? Good luck keeping peace contained without a plastic bag. We are now dependent on aluminum, paper, and glass, each heavier, costlier, and more environmentally demanding to produce and ship. But wait, the irony doesn't end there. In trying to rid the world of plastic, we've actually increased carbon emissions. Glass weighs more, which means heavier trucks, more fuel, more road wear, and more angry truckers realizing their insulated plastic thermoses are now gone too. Paper packaging requires deforestation. Metal requires mining and smelting. In short, we've solved one problem by smashing open 3 others. Now let's take a detour to your local hospital. In this plastic-free reality, hospitals have entered a crisis mode not seen since battlefield tents of the Napoleonic Wars. Surgical gloves? Gone. Sterile syringes? Gone. Full bags, ventilators, insulin pumps, defibrillator casings? Poof! The modern medical miracle machine is now held together by duct tape. Wait, no, that's plastic too. It's held together by despair and hope. We are back to glass syringes that must be sterilized in boiling water, reusable rubber gloves that tear by Thursday, infection rates soar. The risk of cross-contamination becomes so high that routine surgeries are canceled. Ironically, the hospital cafeteria might be the safest place, assuming they've restocked the glass plates, since their disposable trays are now just air. The food is cold, of course, because microwave-safe containers no longer exist. We're beginning to see how deeply plastic underpins not just convenience, but survival. And that's not even touching transportation yet. Every car dashboard, every plane seat, every train armrest riddled with plastic. Control panels? Gone. Seatbelts? Gone. Airbags? Not just gone, illegal. We are now flying in metal tubes with cloth seats and praying that the pilot still has a functioning headset if it's not already short-circuited from the rain pouring in through what used to be a sealed rubber window. Now imagine public transit. Buses without plastic handrails become awkward slapstick ballets of people falling into each other. Subway turnstiles jam because their sensors were plastic housed. Even traffic lights stopped working. The LED panels were covered in polycarbonate. Every day becomes an adventure, and every ride is a potential obituary. And let's not even talk about planes. If you think turbulence is bad, try sitting in a seat made entirely of metal and fabric without padding, with your luggage clunking around in an overhead bin that can't close. You'll long for the humble seatback tray table, that pinnacle of mid-flight convenience. Too bad. Gone. Now try to charge your phone. Oh wait, your phone is gone too. But even if by some miracle it still exists, let's say Apple had one last stash of Bakelite or carved wood lying around, you can't charge it because cables are gone. Chargers? Gone. Electrical insulation? Gone. Your phone is now an elegant brick. And even if you had electricity, your plastic-free power grid is now a fire hazard waiting to happen. Transformers, switches, insulators, circuit boards, all plastic-based. In other words, civilization begins to flicker, not metaphorically, but literally. We are now clinging to the pre-digital age, fueled by paper maps, analog radios, and the last working rotary phone in town. So what's the takeaway? Plastic is not just a nuisance we should banish. It's a marvel of modern chemistry, a keystone in the arch of civilization. Yes, it's polluting. Yes, it's choking oceans. But suddenly vanishing it? That's not salvation. That's suicide. We need better plastics, smarter use, and proper disposal, not a Thanos snap that leaves us defecating in buckets and dying of sepsis. And yet, in this cursed thought experiment, that's where we are. Naked, afraid, and holding a metal spoon to eat soup out of a glass jar, while the dog licks water from the puddle where your fridge used to stand. In the days following the disappearance of all plastic, a peculiar sense of vulnerability settled in. Hospitals, those sterile fortresses of healing, were brought to their metaphorical knees. 4 bags had collapsed into useless membranes. Syringes had become relics of a bygone age. Blood bags? Gone. Dialysis machines? Useless. Ventilators, the final lifeline for countless patients, were now lifeless themselves, devoid of their plastic components. Emergency rooms turned into desperate improvisation centers, where doctors, stripped of the most basic tools, reverted to 19th century methods with 21st century problems. Latex gloves? Obliterated. They tried to replace them with cotton, but cotton doesn't provide sterility. It provides nostalgia. In the neonatal wards, tiny premature babies lay vulnerable, their incubators suddenly non-functional. Nurses wept. Parents screamed. The horrifying irony was that the very material society had villainized, plastic, had been quietly saving lives for decades. But the breakdown didn't stop with medicine. Agriculture soon faced its own apocalypse. Drip irrigation lines, melted dreams, greenhouse film coverings, evaporated. Seed packaging, gone with the wind, literally. Fertilizer bags disintegrated mid-shipment, spilling precious nutrients into shipping containers and rendering entire loads useless. And as for the actual food, supermarkets stood half-stocked with rapidly spoiling goods. No shrink wrap, no plastic crates, no cling film, no bags to carry anything home. Meat sat in soggy cardboard. Yogurt tried to assert itself in leaking paper cartons. Shoppers either left with armfuls of mess or simply didn't shop at all. Supply chains couldn't cope. Where once there were logistics, there was now chaos. Warehouses filled with goods that could no longer be shipped because there were no pallets, no stretch wrap, no containers that could survive moisture. Perishables perished. Durable goods weren't. Even the black market suffered. Smugglers couldn't wrap their contraband in vacuum-sealed packs anymore. Drug lords were now considering artisanal wax paper solutions as if running a meth lab was a boutique cheese operation. And the environmentalists who once dreamed of this world began to look increasingly haunted. Their victory tasted like ash, not because they had wished for destruction, but because they had never really imagined a world without transition, a world where plastic didn't just get replaced, but simply blinked out of existence. The shock was so total, it began to affect language. Plastic surgery suddenly sounded grotesque. Plastic bags became an idiom for futility. Kids asked their parents what plastic was, and adults had to explain the concept like it was a myth. And in the boardrooms of the corporate titans, where suits were once smug with ESG policies and sustainable packaging pilots, executives were now yelling at each other over how to make bottle caps out of metal and tooth floss out of silk. The cost estimates were nuclear. Stock prices plummeted. Just make a biodegradable substitute, someone offered. And the room laughed, not out of joy, but out of despair. Because substitutes require time, research, infrastructure. And that time was never given. It had vanished with the plastic. At first, it seemed poetic. Oceans clear of plastic bags, dolphins not choking on forgotten straws, and no grotesque floating islands of trash the size of Texas. Beaches sparkled. Sea turtles gave 5 flipper salutes. For a brief, delusional moment, the human species believed it had been handed a divine ecological reset. But as the world celebrated, a cold truth loomed. This was not a cleanup. It was a vanishing. The plastic hadn't been collected, recycled, or repurposed. It had simply ceased to exist. No trace. No remains. Just absence. And in that absence, chaos unfurled its sleek, biodegradable wings. In agriculture, greenhouses collapsed like empty lungs. Their structures, once reinforced with UV-resistant polycarbonate, stood exposed and brittle. Farmers watched helplessly as irrigation tubing, mulch films, and seedling trays disintegrated, leaving behind thirsty crops and broken supply chains. The packaging that once wrapped fertilizers and pesticides was gone. Livestock feeders dissolved. Veterinary syringes vanished mid-treatment. Agricultural drones, designed with lightweight plastic frames, fell from the sky like confused robotic pigeons. Global food yields began to plummet. In medicine, hospitals were on life support. Disposable gloves, masks, Ford bags, tubing, and catheters had all disappeared in an instant. Sterile procedures? Impossible. Surgeons stood helpless in operating theaters, scrubbed in and paralyzed. Medical students tried to suture with silk and prayer. Blood transfusions were halted. Dialysis treatments stopped. Organ transplants were postponed indefinitely. The miracle of modern medicine had depended on the miracle of polymers, and now it stood in scrubs, naked and powerless. In transport, bicycles fell apart mid-ride. Cars couldn't start. Insulation, gaskets, and crucial dashboard components had simply ceased to be. Planes were grounded not just because of seating and storage materials vanishing, but because plastic is everywhere from cabin oxygen systems to hydraulic fluid reservoirs. Trains screeched to halts. Subways remained still, and electric vehicles, the pride of a sustainable future, sat useless without polymer-based wiring sheaths, battery casings, or dashboard touch panels. In construction, buildings betrayed their inhabitants. PVC pipes burst open. Wall insulations vanished. Electrical systems short-circuited as exposed wires sparked dangerously. Fire alarms failed. Solar panels cracked. Even paints, most of which contained polymers, peeled away, leaving urban landscapes looking like forgotten Cold War ruins. And then the real horror began. The second-order effects. Without packaging, supermarkets became medieval markets. Produce rotted faster. Dairy curdled. Meat spoiled. Sanitation regressed. People began hoarding anything remotely shelf-stable, but even canned goods had once relied on plastic linings to prevent metal corrosion. In education, children opened their pencil cases to find nothing. Literally nothing. No pens, rulers, calculators, or tablet styluses. Art class was reduced to charcoal and bark. Laptops were dead. Smart boards went black. Desks looked like war relics, metal and wood stripped of comfort, armrests, and protective coatings. Meanwhile, media panicked. News anchors, now without microphones or teleprompters, yelled headlines in the candlelit rooms. Social media influencers attempted to live stream on devices that had lost half their internal structure. In one infamous moment, a fitness influencer screamed into a selfie stick that crumbled mid-bicep curl. Somewhere in Norway, a podcast episode was recorded entirely on stone tablets, the most chilling image of the day. World leaders holding emergency meetings around tables with jagged plasticless microphones, discussing the new global crisis, barely audible over the rattling of their synthetic fiberless suits falling apart. Humanity, it turned out, had never outgrown the age of plastic. It had simply built its entire civilization on top of it, like a Jenga tower of convenience, speed, and disposability. And now that keystone was gone. No negotiation, no warning. Just pure, unadulterated absence. The world had survived the Bronze Age collapse, the fall of Rome, the Black Death, even Y2K. But this was the great plastic undoing. And it had only just begun. But just when humanity was learning to breathe again in its post-plastic anxiety, an unexpected twist emerged from a place no one anticipated: fungi. Deep in the rainforests of Ecuador, researchers had previously cataloged a peculiar species of fungus, Pestalozziopsis microspora, which had gained mild scientific fame for its ability to digest polyurethane. For years, it was an oddity, something graduate students wrote theses on, and a few biotech startups eyed with cautious optimism. But now, with plastic extinct, this fungus was becoming unemployed. Or so it seemed. In the wake of the Great Vanishing, researchers began to notice something unusual in the decay of legacy materials. Abandoned landfills, once bursting with plastic bags and soda bottles, were sprouting mats of this fungus. It wasn't just breaking down the dregs of plastic, it was adapting. In the absence of its favorite food, the fungus evolved. Or more precisely, it mutated. One mutation became 2, then 20. Scientists watched in awe and mild horror as strains began digesting synthetic polymers that were never intended to break down. Old tires, broken toys, shoes from the 1990s. The fungus didn't stop there. It was hungry, and this hunger caused alarm bells to ring in the lab community. In less than a year, the new hyper-efficient strains were found breaking down substances scientists had once thought inert: carbon composites, ballistic materials, even some early generations of silicone used in medical devices. Suddenly, the world faced a new existential question. Had we traded a plastic apocalypse for a fungal one? Governments convened emergency fungal ecology task forces. The United Nations declared a biocontainment priority alert. But controlling a microscopic organism in the open wild was like trying to control air. You couldn't. And the horror wasn't that it ate what was once plastic. The horror was that it didn't know when to stop. Stories began to surface of homes being eaten from the inside out as insulation foams began to decay. Museum artifacts vanished into a fine mold. And in one tragic case, a heart valve implanted decades ago made of vintage polymer degraded mid-surgery. The victim didn't survive. The same human impulse to tinker, to replace, to optimize that gave us plastic was now under interrogation. Had we outsmarted ourselves again? In a weird twist of irony, a few survivors of the plastics industry, those who hadn't pivoted to biotech or gone bankrupt, were suddenly heroes. Their detailed records of polymer chemistry were now in high demand, as scientists raced to catalog what materials were safe, what were edible to the fungi, and what could possibly replace the old materials without becoming fungal fuel. A global moratorium on polymer research was briefly considered, then thrown out because people remembered that water bottles still needed to exist. Even in a post-plastic pre-fungal world, hydration was not negotiable. But necessity, that old driver of invention, did what it always does. It inspired weirdos. In a university basement in Slovenia, a group of materials engineers turned to something humanity had once mocked: hemp. Hemp composites, pressed into layers, baked with resins derived from beetle shells, offered surprising resistance to the fungus. It wasn't perfect, but it bought time. And sometimes, in science and in life, time is all you need to survive the next wave. The irony of relying on a plant that had once been banned, demonized, and ridiculed for decades wasn't lost on anyone. Talk show hosts made jokes. Governments sheepishly removed old restrictions. Hemp Saves Humanity became a weirdly popular bumper sticker. But beneath the satire was a deeper reckoning. We had built an entire civilization on convenience. Plastic was never the problem. We were. And as the world slowly rebuilt, with biocomposites and smarter materials, a strange reverence began to grow for the fragility of design. A plastic-free future wasn't just about material substitution. It was about humility. Understanding that nothing humans create is truly forever, unless nature decides it should be. And sometimes she changes her mind. And now somewhere in the depths of New Jersey, a man stares into his empty refrigerator. "Where the hell is my cheese?" he asks, with the kind of trembling desperation usually reserved for hostage situations. What he doesn't yet know is that cheese, like most modern food products, relied on plastic for packaging, for preservation, and for surviving the 78-mile journey from processing plant to suburban fridge. Welcome back to our cheerful descent into a world where all plastic has suddenly vanished. And in Part 9, we examine the unraveling of global food supply chains, consumer habits, and the entire infrastructure of modern consumption. Let's start at the source, the grocery store. Without plastic, shelves become bare not because the food isn't produced, but because it can't be moved, stored, or displayed in any sanitary or efficient manner. Prepackaged meats? Gone. Vacuum-sealed coffee? Adieu. The humble yogurt cup, a monument to polymer perfection, vanished. What's left is food that can survive in bulk bins, wrapped in paper or housed in fragile glass. A trip to the store now resembles a scavenger hunt inside a 1940s ration depot. Forget your reusable bag. You'll need a crate, a wheelbarrow, and nerves of steel to carry your loot. Now zoom out to the global food trade. Bananas from Ecuador? They're now bruised to mush before they even reach customs. Frozen shrimp from Thailand? They're shipped without the thermal insulation of plastic foam, arriving as seafood soup. The once global menu collapses into regional dependency. People in Kansas are rediscovering sorghum not as a trend, but as a necessity. Californians now barter almonds for citrus like it's 1825. Restaurants shift to hyper-local fare, and your favorite sushi spot in Berlin is now serving fermented cabbage and sadness. But it's not just the food itself, it's how we keep it safe. Without plastic liners and sanitary wraps and polyethylene coatings, contamination risks explode. Outbreaks of E. coli, salmonella, and listeria spike dramatically. Hospitals see a rise in foodborne illnesses, even as their own medical systems are paralyzed by the loss of plastic equipment. In homes, leftovers now require ceramic pots and glass jars. Tupperware parties become historical reenactments, and cling wrap is just a wistful memory. The absence of plastic doesn't just disrupt convenience, it dismantles the temporal buffer between fresh and spoiled, turning daily meals into a race against rot. Then comes the financial toll. Food prices skyrocket, not due to scarcity, but due to complexity. Alternative packaging like bioplastics, wax-coated fiber, or glass is expensive, limited, and often less effective. Middle and low-income households begin to experience food insecurity not because the food isn't there, but because it can't reach them in time, safely, or affordably. Hunger isn't a symptom of drought or war anymore. It's a logistics problem, a packaging crisis. Meanwhile, governments scramble. Some nations attempt to return to traditional materials, banana leaves, woven baskets, clay pots. Others invest in moonshot biopackaging startups that claim they can create a cow dung-based container that biodegrades in 3 hours and smells like lavender. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Tech bros begin selling artisanal beeswax wraps at $47 per square foot, while moms on TikTok try to preserve sandwiches in cabbage leaves and hope their children won't be bullied. Food waste, already a massive issue before, multiplies. Without plastic barriers, everything spoils faster. Farmers can't sell their crops in time. Retailers lose inventory. Households throw out more than they consume. Globally, tons of edible food now rot within arm's reach of people who can't afford it. In the age of abundance, we have manufactured a famine by misplacing the plastic puzzle piece that held it all together. The irony is thick enough to chew on, assuming you still have food to chew. And amidst all this culinary chaos, people begin to realize that the humble plastic film, the very thing they once cursed for wrapping their cucumbers individually, was in fact the invisible scaffolding of modern nutrition. The supermarket, that great temple of consumer power, is now a ghost town of wilting lettuce and broken dreams.
And if you think dinner's hard now, just wait until we reach the world of fashion in final part.
And just like that, humanity stood on the other side of the Great Plastic Vanishing Act. Not with triumph, not quite with devastation, but with a strange cocktail of bewilderment and reluctant adaptability. As the last remnants of panic settled into the dustbins of collective memory, those bins now made from bamboo, by the way, society found itself staring down a new kind of normal. Airports no longer wrapped your luggage in cling film. Grocery stores displayed produce naked, sweating slightly under open air. And yes, people finally started remembering to bring their damn reusable bags. The environment had changed too, almost in defiance of our collective skepticism. Satellite imagery showed garbage islands shrinking, slowly but surely. Beaches once buried under 1,000 years' worth of single-use regret now offered up sands untouched for decades. Rivers ran cleaner. Birds stopped trying to digest bottle caps. Turtles breathed a little easier. But the victory wasn't absolute. A world without plastic meant a world with painful trade-offs. Medical equipment, previously sterile, cheap, and single-use, was now bulkier, more expensive, and often had to be reused with rigorous protocols. Developing nations bore the brunt of these shifts, their fragile supply chains upended, their economies scrambling for alternatives that wealthy nations hoarded like toilet paper during a pandemic. But amidst the chaos emerged something oddly hopeful, innovation unshackled by convenience. New materials, new thinking, and perhaps most shocking of all, a new humility. The global culture began to shed its obsession with disposability, treating goods and perhaps even people with a little more permanence. And here's the punchline. We still miss plastic. Secretly. Quietly. Like an ex you know is terrible for you, but whose memes were just unmatched. Yet we didn't go back. We couldn't. It was gone. The spell was irreversible. But the experience left humanity with a rare gift. The ability to see the cost of a thing not just in dollars, but in decades. To feel the weight of a straw not in grams, but in centuries. Maybe, just maybe, that vision would carry us forward into other hard choices, climate action, AI ethics, interstellar colonization, without accidentally nuking ourselves in zero gravity. Because if the sudden disappearance of plastic taught us anything, it's this. When the world you know vanishes overnight, the only thing left to mold is your mindset. And that, my friends, is biodegradable. You've been listening to What If Horizons, where every hypothetical comes with actual consequences. If your brain survived this 10,000-word plastic purge, hit subscribe, leave us a review, or share this episode with someone who still drinks from red Solo cups. Until next time, remember, the future may be disposable, but your attention span doesn't have to be.